11,500 year period cycle would do that without question, not even 1/5 of 1/8 of a percent of possibility not doing it. We would be knocked so far back that we would be living in caves again. We would start from scratch. The entire planet would start from scratch again, unless you're underground.
Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age Conversations covers changes in our climate due to a new and intensifying grand solar minimum. In the media, overlooking, downplaying, or burying cold weather changes occurring on our planet. This is in order to keep the global warming agenda steaming full speed ahead. I do this podcast and radio program because we need to begin conversations on how to adapt our food growing strategies long before 2030 as agricultural zones shift, affecting global crop output, but very few mainstream media outlets are talking about the most important issue of our time, cold weather crop losses. Our sun is going through a 400-year cycle, which has effects on our weather patterns as our magnetosphere weakens and the jet streams go out of flow. It's not CO2, it's not you, it's the sun. Are you ready to thrive in the grand solar minimum? Then join me for Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David DuByne.
I talked about how the economists are now really jumping over into the grand solar minimum sphere. Harry Dent is one. Martin Armstrong's another. Gerald Celente, the Trends Journal forecaster, talking about it as well. Now it's really starting to circulate in a second sphere of influencers going out there. Because I think they see the same thing. They understand the same thing. The global awareness on the timeline here. 2028 is complete losses. Down to zero. Global famine. What are you going to prepare first? What would you buy first? How would you behave with your finances first? So this is another thing to contend with. The more the awareness grows, the more people are going to exit their positions in the financial markets. And what I mean by that, I want to bring it into English that's easy enough for everybody to understand. The more people understand this event's going to happen, this grand solar minimum is going to drive into food prices that are never ending. And then eventually we're going to come to the point where even if you have the money, you won't be able to get it or buy it. You'll have to grow your own. Trade with somebody who already had it and stored it. At this point, when they know this event is coming in at the doorstep, they're going to start selling things that they own so they can get money to prepare. So let's say you understand this fully and you say, well, I have $100,000 in the stock market. I think everything's topped anyway. They're going to need to have more chaos and more distraction as we go down this timeline of crop losses. There's just going to need to be more distraction. Everywhere, shape and form, everywhere across the planet, every strata, whatever you are involved in and you find information, there's got to be a distraction somewhere. You pull your money out of the stocks, you sell it, you get your cash. Now what are you going to go buy? Okay, you're one person. What if 100,000 people start to do the same thing and it's 10 million out of the market, 100 million out of the market, $1 billion out of the market? Okay, fine. They can handle that. But what happens when 100 million people wake up and see the same thing and have the same trigger reaction to exit and sell everything? Stocks, bonds, cash in the 401ks, cash in the, yield, whatever you have out there for yields, annuities, whatever it is. And they start pulling their money out of the banks. Our financial system built on fractional reserving is not going to hold up because they're going to have to pull that money out. I think somewhere around 100 million people would probably be the unplugging of our markets because there would be that much money and that many exit positions coming out at the same time. That would be an enormous amount. Can you imagine 100 million in these well-to-do countries that cash everything out at the same time?
And this episode's brought to you by TrueLeafMarket.com. Heirloom and organic seeds since 1974. Full range of garden seeds, microgreen seeds, sprouting seeds, wheatgrass, grain seeds, flower seeds, herb seeds, and ground cover crop. I encourage you to take a look at their website, trueleafmarket.com, and they even have free starter guides there for you to learn how to grow sprouts, microgreens, herbs, and wheatgrass. Use the link below and give yourself the gift of organic and heirloom seeds.
What if it's 250 million people? They're all going to wake up at some point, and they're all going to have the same reaction. They're going to sell whatever they have to get money to go get prepared. So this is the whole thing where the economic forecasters start to roll into the XYZ. How fast is this thing going to unfold? The signs are all around us right now. If you look back here on Electroverse on the extreme weather page, ski season starts a month early in the Alps, thanks to heavy global warming. And we saw that all-time record snows in France, all-time record snow in Spain, all-time record snow in Italy. So they have enough snowpack up there to open all the ski resorts a month early with incredible heavy snow. And imagine, oh, the North American ski resorts are opening too. No, say it ain't so. Month early. And guess what? Down in Australia, the ski resorts are staying open later because they have enough snow. And so you can see there's more precipitation in the atmosphere. There's more snowfalls coming down. In contrary to what the IPCC told us, clearly we would never know what snow was again. You remember Al Gore saying that? I surely do. Almost anybody of you that are 30 years or older remember Al Gore saying, your children will never know what snow was or what is. Now we're having all-time record snows early, so then they switched the narrative and said, well, yeah, see, we said the oceans would evaporate, and because there's more evaporation, there's more water vapor, which creates more snow cover. Now, wait a second. How'd you bait and switch that since 2009, and then suddenly now it's the... Spanish farmers, again, I want to talk about the record snows in Spain. The Spanish farmers recovering sheep buried deep in snow. And also Morocco already has 4 feet of snow. Herders have been dying, freezing to death. Shepherds and their flocks in Morocco, same exact things are happening. The sheep are buried in snow. Some of them survived, some of them didn't. But also the sheep herders and the goat herders in Morocco have frozen to death in several places. Now, these guys know the weather. They sense it. They know it. They live it. They're outdoors all the time. They're masters of their environment, literally. Yet they're being trapped in storms that they go to take shelter, and it's so intense that they end up dying of exposure and cold. These sheep herders and goat herders have been since children, and they're say 60 years old. The guy's been doing it since he's a kid. Do you think he knows a thing or two about staying warm in an adverse condition in case a storm pops up? You think they know a little about how to build a quickie survival shelter in case something comes and they weren't expecting it? I'm going to say absolutely yes. These guys are masters of their environment. They know how to survive out there, take care of their herds, and then avoid the elements or blend with them and keep themselves safe. Yet these storms that have swept through not only Spain but Morocco have caught even these most intuitive of our nature souls on this planet off guard. It's really incredible and telling when these people are caught in the storms and die. If they told us there would be no more snow or snows would be diminishing, it would get hotter and there'd be less snow. But now everything seems to be reversing. So the year you kind of want to look for, what a lot of people are saying, including myself, is because of the sunspots, it seems that it's really matching up with the late 1970s. So if it's anywhere close to being correct to the predictions, there'll be a city that gets snowed in this year. Well, they'll have to bring in the army to bring in supplies because it'll be too thick of snow all the time. And they'll just continually snowing. And it's going to be something that should make international news, where a city will be blockaded by more and more and more, just never ending weeks and weeks of snow where the citizens can't even get out. The stores can't get resupplied. And it'll be a parking lot on the highways because the roofs will be completely covered with snow. It'll be a multi 10, 20-foot event of snow, which will blockade a city. So this will be right on par with the uptick in this grand solar minimum. And you got to realize the thing when I just was talking about these record snows in Morocco, it's 4 feet of snow now in Morocco, 4 feet. So what is causing this ramp up and this uptick in our weather? Now, I want to go back to Valentina Zarkova's talk here. she kept referencing these multi-thousand-year cycles, and she kept referencing incredible long time periods, but she didn't come out right and say that, we're going to enter this other longer duration, heavier cooling, more powerful cycle. She just called it a grand cycle, extra heavy grand solar minimum. So is there really something that's much more powerful and a heavier cycle that's on the way, 3,600 years or something really incredibly long time duration that we're not prepared for? Because even with these grand solar minimum changes people are talking about, if you go back in the historical counts back to the 1600s, and there's quite a few. If you can read English, there's a lot of stuff from the English at that time. If you read French or Spanish, there's quite a few, notes and bibliographies and text and a lot of just accounts of what went on during that time that have also been translated in English. And when you look at what happened then, the transition and the storms they talked about didn't happen this fast when they were coming into this little ice age. It seemed that the progression going into it was slower than what we're experiencing now. So it begs the question, is it really not a grand solar minimum that we're heading into, but something much more powerful and not a full-blown ice age? If you look at the galactic cross, these timelines of 11,500 year period events of cooling, cyclical weather, it's the halfway point in the precession of the equinoxes, the 25,000 plus year round trip referenced by so many ancient cultures. But are they alluding to something that we're getting ready to hit the galactic cross and we're going back to an 11,500 year event? Because they keep talking about these longer time frames, but it's almost like, language within language. An 11,500 year event would absolutely reel our society back up to less than 500 million people. Now it goes, taking that over to the Georgia Guidestones, they're not talking about reducing the population. It says keep the population under 500 million. So something knocked it back to that point, and now since they're rebuilding, they're going to keep it at a certain point. 11,500 year period cycle would do that without question, not even 1/5 of 1/8 of a percent of possibility not doing it. We would be knocked so far back that we would be living in caves again. We would start from scratch. The entire planet would start from scratch again, unless you're underground, which makes me wonder where all this money has gone to build out all these underground bases. There's no conspiracy in this at all. I mean, there have been so many underground bases built for the military. Hell, even out in Taiwan, I went over, traveled to these Matsu Islands. Now, it's a special type of rock out there, and they drilled all types of tunnels through this thing. And it is a well-known fact that there's a full-on underground city under those islands that had room for 20,000 people. Functioning, that connects to the other islands. Because the Matsu, if you take a boat or a ferry, it takes about an hour or so to go between the islands. But word is, common knowledge, that all those islands are connected by tunnel. They all have facilities for at least 20,000 people. Dongyin had the city for 75,000, but Dongju, which is a smaller island, had facility for about 20. But they don't even have 20,000 people on the island, they have like a couple thousand people on the island. Underground military facilities are quite well known. All the bunkers, doesn't matter which country you're in, European command, United States, what continuity of government, everything's underground. Everything, all of it. What do you think is going on in Wyoming, over in Colorado as well? They're putting, everything that's done with the nuclear launch code, everything is underground. We know it is a well-established science to build underground facilities. The only way that you would survive a 11,500 year cooling event would be to be underground for 50 or 100 years and then pop back up. The population would be squeezed back down to the equatorial bands again. And the climate patterns across the planet would completely shift into all these new areas. Would be mega droughts in some places, massive cold and wet in others, and just massive wet in others places. You wouldn't even know when to plant, when to harvest. You wouldn't even know the next year what the climate would shift to. That's how much of a shift it would be. But what I am saying is with all the changes that are happening, they're happening way faster than what was recorded back in the last little ice age. So something is very different with this cycle that we're entering. East coast of Canada, cold. Well, we saw that last year in the Maritimes where they lost so much. They even lost Christmas tree plantations due to excessive cold in Canada. The cold events that are happening, this was way late spring as well. This was something like in May. They had a freeze event that came down into Newfoundland, Eastern Canada, Maritimes, and it wiped out Christmas tree plantations due to excessive cold. Now, that should put a red flag up there. Christmas trees and cold, they go together, right? But when they're killed because it's too cold, it means the climate has shifted substantially where a whole new zone is forming, and actually the zones are shifting of climatic zones as well as grow zones. Also with the natural gas prices, we're starting to see with the new forecast coming out, they're talking about another polar vortex forming, and they're saying look for above $5 per cubic meter gas. Remember back in 2008 and 9, it went up to $13. But Merrill Lynch comes out with a report and says, if it reaches $5, it's going to pull from the consumer spending economy out of the regular market, and it's going to have some draw and effect on the economy because people are spending more to heat their homes. They're not going to go out and spend on food, movies, travel, entertainment, because their natural gas bills are going to double or triple through the winter. So they were talking about a pullback in winter spending and Christmas expending or expenditures. So you can really start to see how this is intertwining into the economy. Now, having people take their money out of the bank or take their money out of the stock market to go ahead and buy things to get ready for the grand solar minimum, that's one set. But just straight up food prices doubling, that's another set of circumstance that's going to pull on the economy. If Merrill Lynch is quoting and saying that if natural gas reaches $5 cubic meter for people to heat their homes with, and that's going to pull from the consumer expending economy, what's going to happen when your food prices go up even further, doubling? That's going to pull out of the consumer spending economy further as well. It's going to get diverted into a very narrow sector of agriculture.
And since I have been talking about our need moving forward in this new society that we're entering as our global grain production starts to be reduced in yield, your food prices are going to skyrocket. And I mean skyrocket, not just doubling or tripling, something like 5 or 10 times higher by 2020 at the very least. TrueLeafMarket.com. I really want to talk about growing your own food, which will be a necessity moving forward. They've been around since 1974, heirloom and organic seeds. You know, since I've started talking about them in my videos, I have a lot of people write and say that they've previously ordered, that they know the owner, having great results, good customer service. They quite enjoyed the seed quality as well. And there's so many ways that we can go about growing different types of vegetables that we're going to need. You know, microgreens are incredibly nutritious. They're super fast to grow. In less than a week, you can have something that you can eat. And we know the benefits of microgreens. All you have to do is use a search engine and look up vitamin, mineral, nutrient content of microgreens. You'll be shocked. Also, sprouts. We can get those a little bit taller, a little more dense, a little bit larger volume on the vegetation mass coming off of there. So how do you know what kind of sprouts to grow? How about wheatgrass or herbs? What about different types of herbs that we can add to our foods? Now, what I just described to you, there's a full range of starter guides there at TrueLeafMarket.com for you to take a look at. Even if it's just for your own knowledge and you don't purchase something from them, at least get the information so you know how to grow microgreens, you know how to grow sprouts, you understand what some of the herbs are for. And not only that, they have wheatgrass and grain seeds. So when I'm talking about grain growing regions going offline, we just need to look back in history and see where across the planet there was difficulty growing grains when this grand solar minimum intensified and the jet stream started wandering just like they're doing today due to a decreased magnetosphere that does not hold our jet streams locked in their traditional flows. Grains are one thing, herb seeds are another, cover crops, something different, but whatever you do, organic seeds are going to be a necessity because you can save those seeds and then grow them the next season, which you unequivocally cannot do with GMO. TrueLeafMarket.com. Use the link below and give yourself the gift of organic and heirloom seeds.
So you see the 2028 date given for the global food shortages. There's going to be a lot of things happening well in advance of that. well in advance. Remember, that 2028 date is just strictly when everything pretty much that could have happened will have happened, and it'll go to the lowest production it could possibly go, and it'll stay there for 4 years. But leaning into that, this is going to get less and less. You're going to see the economies, you're going to see population migration, and you're going to see colder weather events, and the price of your food continue to increase. If you're looking at the 10 millibar GFS models for the Northern Hemisphere, and one heck of a cold January, February, March, and April. So I could see why Merrill Lynch has come out and said, hey, look for more expensive prices for natural gas. And I understand why they're also showing or at least explaining how this would pull on the economy. Just to get a good reference, go back to 2008 and 2009. You really don't need much of a history book for this. You just need to go back a few years. Because those of you who remember this clearly, all those prices of everything in the commodities rose outrageously is an understatement. You know, natural gas, $13, and they're talking about, economic effects of $5. Petrol prices were almost $6 a gallon, much higher, 10, 12 US dollars outside the United States for gas, except for the producing countries in the Middle East. When you're spending like $10 US a gallon in Asia, people took a lot more public transportation. They're talking about the same rises again. So you can see where the push and pull will be. Just relive the past a little bit. Again, your crystal ball for the future is what has happened in our past. So this rises in commodities prices. Just go back 9 years and take a look at what happened. You already know it. That's so close. That is so well documented as to what happened. Which sectors got turned off first, which sectors people quit spending first, and how it affected the rest of the economy as which individual indices or commodities rose in price. Going back to the 1600s takes a little more doing. You're looking for somewhere around 1640-ish is where you want to try to find some of these climatic records. Meteorologist Mike Hoffman predicting a cold and snowy one for North America. Same thing, 1977, 1978 type of winter. And wait a minute, 172 inches of snow in South Bend, Indiana during that winter. Plus, remember Buffalo, that's a perfect example of one of those events when the city will be snowed in a siege that will need help from the army of a country to get it out where people will not starve or freeze in their homes. Buffalo, New York is a pretty good example of that. Look for another one of those. Yeah, he's talking about possible another blizzard of 1978 on tap. So South Bend, Indiana also broke their all-time snow record last year. Now, South Bend, Notre Dame fans, it is a snow belt place. So when I was going to university, I went up with some friends during a couple of holidays up around that area too. Cleveland, Ohio, and South Bend, Indiana. I went up around that area there, Buffalo, New York. It's a snow belt. It snows every year, an enormous amount up there. It's always the snowiest place because you get that lake effect snow coming off. And then last year, South Bend broke its all-time season snow total. And that wasn't even what is considered a bad winter on tap like this winter. So think about those big cities. Now you're going to I'll pin down a couple places here for you. Snowbelt cities would be the first ones to look at. Like Chicago would have snow and cold. South Bend would have snow. So you're just going to put a few of these four cities together and then just watch them through the winter. Buffalo, New York, another you're going to look for. If it gets record snows, there's something changing in the pattern. Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio as well, snowbelt, that whole area there. So those steel Great Lakes cities are a very good indicator. It's kind of a canary in the Northern Hemisphere coal mine, at least for North America. If these places indicate more snow this year than it did last year, and we get back into something like the late 1970s, then the following years are going to even be more intense. So you have to wonder where that's going to go. If you go to a Maunder minimum temperature reconstruction map, if you just go to any search engine, take a look at the images, you'll find a picture that'll have dark blue, light blue, and a picture of the globe on it. It'll be a circular globe or it'll be kind of one of the expanded flat globe views. When you look at where the Maunder minimum temperatures were coldest across the reconstruction map in the 1640s to say 1710, Morocco is a standout spot in Northwest Africa. And there's a little bit of blue right over Algeria as well. What are the statistical possibilities of an area that has been mapped out that had extreme cold temperatures with these same type of solar events having all-time record snows months early in the exact same spot that the temperatures dropped 3 or 4 degrees Celsius in the last solar events 400 years ago. And Algeria as well. Record snow, tornadoes in the desert, record floods, all this year. And the record early snow as well. When Morocco got their snow, Algeria got snow as well. Some of the earliest ever recorded, and their records were going back to 700 AD. So what's going on with the changes? Now, it's very apparent that we're shifting into some sort of new climate. Now, my whole thing, again, my head's spinning on so many different directions here. Are we going back to an extreme cold event on the multi-millennial cycles? And if yes, how fast will this progress? Because talking about an entry into an intensification and amplification of a 400-year event on a grand solar minimum, the progression for the next 9 years is going to be very, very different than if we're going into a 3,600-year cooling event, where the progression is going to be, exponentially larger each year, stepping down. And what if it's an 11,500-year event back into the galactic cross? The step downs are going to be so intense that what you're seeing in these last 6 months should happen every single year going down in temperature. For the next 9 years, that would bring us back pretty much to those kind of temperatures. And imagine if the snowfalls are doubling and tripling from these points every single year from this point forward in these same areas. And instead of getting 4 feet of snow, they get 16 feet of snow. The planet was very, very, very different when we look at different time frames in our past when you go thousands of years back and take a look. And then one of the last things I want to reference in Valentina's well done, amazingly accurate, incredibly well-spoken presentation at the Global Warming Policy Forum. She mentioned that every successive heat spike since the last 10,000 years has been lower than the last one. She talked about growing grapes up in Scotland when they had vineyards in Scotland and England. She talked about the Egyptian warm period going back 5,200 years. To point it out that each successive heat spike is going lower and lower and lower, and this next, whatever we've reached on the heat, we've already peaked on the heat for this cycle. The next heat cycle is not even going to be close to this heat that we've experienced in these last 50 years. And if you take a look at the drop-off, then that means our next heat cycle will be at the peak about 1 degree Celsius cooler than where we are now, 0.5 degree Celsius cooler than where we are now. We still need to go down another 0.5 degree, and then that'll be the new heat peak that comes along the next cycle in a couple hundred years.
This video is brought to you by our friends at TrueLeafMarket.com. Heirloom and organic seeds for any grow zone on our planet.